Something else to think about as they get older, reading and math is also very hard, and as far as in my son's case, because of the delayed speech that he had for so long. It wasn't until he was about 8 years old that he became more articulate, that we understood what his jargon was that he was saying. But at the same time, in his case, he didn't want to read because it was very hard for him. He couldn't get the words out. He couldn't get the reading from a word, processing in your head, knowing what phonics are, whether it's a sight word, which is reading the whole word, is one type of learning how. But it's very hard for a child who has a speech impairment to break the individual consonants or vowels down in a word and know how to produce them. So because of that deficit, reading can be very difficult. You know, if it's hard for you to do something, regardless of your disability, it's going to take you twice as hard to do something. But if you don't enjoy it, it's even harder to want to do it. So even though to this day, even though he's 13, he did a remarkable thing. I would say about a month ago, we decided, my husband and I decided to get him bar mitzvah, which is in the Jewish religion, it's when you become 13 and you have a special service and things like that. And phonetically, you translate the Hebrew words, even though he could not read them, the alphabet, but phonetically, they break them down. And he has a hard enough time reading English, regular English in books, which he has a hard time reading, let alone learning a whole new language and something entirely different. And he never went to Hebrew school. So when that time came, he wanted to learn. So he learned all the prayers, even though it was a shortened service. He learned all the prayers and said all the Hebrew and everything else. And I was just so proud that he wanted to do it himself. And he did it. And nobody was forcing him, and nobody was saying, okay, you've got to, you know, every single day for 25 minutes or 30 minutes you have to do this. He did it by himself. And, you know, I have to say, I didn't know I'd ever get to that point. Now, there's still deficits as far as academic deficits, which is something else to think about. When you have a child with a speech impairment, sometimes because of the testing that they can give you, your scores are very low because you have a problem with the articulation and the verbal part or the nonverbal parts of a test from preschool on. So your testing might be very, very low. Which is something to think about, because what you're saying in your head sometimes is a lot different when you're thinking in your head than what you can say on some of the testing, the educational testing they give you as you're getting older and as you're going through school. And so that's something that's very hard, because if you say to yourself, if they're not on a level with the as far as age-wise with some of the regular kids, how do you catch them up, or how do you help them when they have this deficit to begin with? And it's only from intensive, not only speech therapy, but also extra help, that, you know, you also have to look at the child and say to yourself, where my child was when there was no sound at all at 2, and it took him 6 or 8 years just to get to the beginning level of possibly kindergarten, if you want to call it that, or higher levels of schooling. It's going to take them a lot longer to, even if they are verbal at this particular point, when they do tests and nonverbal tests, they're going to test differently than other tests, other educational tests. So that's something also, you know, to think about. You know, that you know, some of the testing, when they word it to you, unless you're also familiar as a child, unless you're also familiar with what they're going to ask you, the circumstances or the questions, and you've been exposed to that, sometimes it's very hard to know what the answer is going to be. For instance, just to give you some example, if you have an educational test just to find out where your child is on a certain level, and they live in the mountains, and they've never seen an ocean, If they see a picture of a dock with a boat, how are they supposed to know what that is if they've never been exposed to it? I mean, I'm just giving you an example, not saying this is my son's case, but just to give you a little example. You know, so when there's a bunch of tests that they give you, WIS tests and some other educational tests to find out what the level is of your education as you get older. You know, and the other thing is, when you're younger, you have more of an opportunity to try and correct some of the deficits than when you're older.
Why don't we hold that thought? We're going to take a break. We're going to come back because I want to talk about early intervention, and that really is key, and getting that help as quickly as possible. So
Sure.
Again, my guest is Jeanne Buesser. She is the founder and the president of the Apraxia Network of Bergen County. You're watching Community Impact. We're going to take a break. We'll see you in just a minute or so. Stay with us.
Mom?
Dad?
How long should I wait for you? Mom?
If I'm at soccer practice.
What if something happens? Will you come get me?
There's no reason not to have a plan in case of a terrorist attack.
Mom, if you're not home, should we go to the neighbor's house?
And some extremely good reasons why you should.
Can you tell me?
Talk to your family about what you would do in case of an emergency. For more information, go to www.ready.gov.
Hi, I'm Luis from Sesame Street.
Hey!
I'm introducing Elmo to some healthy new snacks.
Delicious fruit.
Healthy habits start early. In fact, studies suggest that children form these habits even by age 3. It's the small steps that you take that make a real difference for you and your children.
Oh, may Elmo introduce Louise to some healthy food?
Sure.
Oh, Mr. Broccoli, this is Louise.
How do you do?
Fine.
Welcome back to Community Impact. My guest is the founder and the president of the Apraxia Network of Bergen County, and
Thank you.
her name is Jeanne Buesser.
Yes.
And Jeanne was very specific about saying it is the Apraxia Network of Bergen County, but really it's the Apraxia Network, period.
Correct.
Because you've been on YouTube, you've been on Facebook, you're getting responses from people all over the world.
Yes.
And yet this isn't something that a lot of people talk about. You don't hear about apraxia. You hear more about autism.
Yes.
But there are resources for people. You say there's a great book called
There's a great book called The Late Talker. It's by Lisa Gang, G-E-N-G, and Dr. Agin, A-G-I-N. It not only talks about apraxia from a parent's point of view and a professional, but where to go for help, resources on insurance issues, getting the child's speech therapy, not only where to go for help on that aspect, but getting it covered by insurance, and that's a big thing, as well as where to go from other aspects as well.
Now we talked a little bit about this in the earlier segment, but early intervention is really probably one of the key components here in really kind of shaping your child's development, is it not?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
The basic thing that every parent should do if they think there's a problem, or if they don't know if there's a problem, and they go to the regular pediatrician for a checkup, and they don't talk about speech or speech development or cooing or anything like that, go see a developmental pediatrician. They are more versed in whys and wherefores of the medical diagnoses, and will ask you specific questions to get the diagnosis for your child. And from there you can go to early intervention, where from there you need at least, I believe, at least a third or more of a deficit. And they have a particular screening process that you have to pass in order to be part of early intervention. And from there, from when you get that, you can go to speech therapies, occupational therapies, physical therapies. And that's the basic key that I want to point about, is not only the early intervention, but finding from your area where there's help, what resources are available. Throughout the world, people don't know in their own countries where to go for help. Look about developmental pediatricians, speech therapists, occupational therapists, professors in colleges, just as a fluke. graduate students don't know about apraxia. If they do, they don't know about the warning signs. So coming out of grad school, going into speech pathology, sometimes they're not versed in it. So they don't know themselves what the warning signs are. This isn't always the case for the older people who've been there for a long, long time. But that is one of the basic things. Medical nurses, doctors, things like that. Not to say that each child who is born is going to be born with apraxia. We don't have the statistics at this point. But the thing is, if the hospitals had the warning signs to give to the new parents, they at least, if they had a problem as a child was developing, without being speech or cooing or sitting up or low muscle tone, they'd have some place to go throughout the world or parent resources in the area to go for help. And that's my whole point.